There's a moment in every man's life when he looks in the mirror and wonders, why do some men walk into a room and instantly pull attention, while I blend into the background? Here's the uncomfortable truth. The thing that makes a man magnetic isn't his looks, his height, his money, or even his confidence. It's something deeper, something most men never discover about themselves. And that's why you're here, because I need to tell you something you were never supposed to know. Most men aren't lacking attractiveness. They're lacking presence. A rare psychological force that doesn't shout, doesn't beg, doesn't try. It pulls. You've seen this man before. He talks slowly. He listens fully. He isn't rushing to be liked, approved, or accepted. He moves like someone who already knows his value, even if no one else sees it yet. But here's the twist. That level of magnetism doesn't come from ego. It comes from inner stillness. An emotional quiet that comes only when a man finally stops chasing external validation and starts grounding himself in who he truly is. And that journey begins with a truth most men find uncomfortable. You cannot be magnetic if you're afraid of being misunderstood. Think about that. Every time you over-explain yourself, every time you try to impress, every time you force humor, force charm, force confidence, you lose the very energy that makes people naturally gravitate toward you. Magnetism isn't performance, it's alignment. It's the moment you stop fighting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. It's when your silence carries more weight than someone else's words. It's when a woman looks at you and can feel, without you saying a thing, that you're not fragile, you're not desperate, and you're not seeking her validation to breathe. Most men think being magnetic is about being loud, bold, or dominant. Psychology says the opposite. A magnetic man is the one who is comfortable with his own depth. Because depth is rare. Depth is intimidating. Depth can't be faked. And the moment you start developing it, your energy shifts. People feel it. Women notice it. Rooms respond to it. And suddenly, you're no longer invisible. You're undeniable. There's a silence inside truly magnetic men that most people can't explain. It's not emptiness. It's awareness. A man becomes magnetic the moment he stops being controlled by his reactions. And this is where almost every man loses his power without realizing it. He reacts too fast, too emotionally, too automatically. Not because he's weak, but because he's unaware of how much of his behavior is driven by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of being overlooked, fear of not being chosen. These fears whisper in the background of your mind, shaping how you speak, how you stand, how you look at people, how you handle silence. And women, especially intuitive women, notice it instantly, not because you say anything, but because your energy reveals everything. Here's the psychological truth. People don't respond to your words first. They respond to your emotional state. And most men walk around with a chaotic emotional state. They're overthinking, overanalyzing, and overcompensating. They're performing instead of being. They're trying to impress instead of expressing. They're trying to win approval instead of owning their space. A magnetic man doesn't rush, he doesn't chase, he doesn't seek attention, he doesn't force a moment. He lets things come to him because he knows his worth isn't up for negotiation. And do you know what creates that kind of energy? Emotional self-regulation, when a man can be calm when others panic, when he can listen without interrupting, when he can hold eye contact without flinching, when he can allow silence without scrambling to fill it. He projects something rare, internal stability. Women feel this immediately. Men respect it instinctively. Strangers sense it without knowing why. Because stability is magnetic. Clarity is magnetic. A man who isn't controlled by his impulses becomes someone others naturally trust. And here's the part most men misunderstand. Magnetism isn't about being the center of attention. It's about being the center of yourself. When you can sit with your emotions instead of running from them, you give off a kind of quiet intensity that captivates. It's not loud, it's felt. It's not aggressive, it's grounded. And that grounding becomes the psychological signal that says, this man knows himself, and the world is drawn to men who know themselves. There's a reason some men walk into a room and instantly shift the energy without saying a single word. It's because magnetism isn't created in public, it's built in private. Most men think attraction starts with how they look, how they dress, or how they speak. But psychology reveals something deeper. A man becomes magnetic when he develops a relationship with himself that's stronger than his craving for external approval. And here's the truth most men never realize. You can't be magnetic if you don't trust yourself. Think about how often you question your own instincts, how often you hesitate before speaking, how often you replay conversations in your mind, wishing you had said something different, how often you dilute your opinions so you don't offend, how often you let others decide your value without ever checking whether their judgment even matters. Every one of these moments weakens your presence. They drain the masculine energy that makes you compelling, mysterious, and grounded. But the reason they happen isn't because you lack confidence, it's because you lack inner alignment. Your actions, your desires, and your truth are not operating in sync. A magnetic man does something very few men do. He chooses himself first, not selfishly, not arrogantly, but with clarity. He knows what he wants. He knows what he stands for. He knows what he won't tolerate. And he doesn't bend those values to make someone else comfortable. That's what creates the aura you feel around certain men, the sense that they're solid, consistent, unshakable. They aren't swayed by opinions. They aren't manipulated by attention. They aren't desperate for validation. And that level of self-trust becomes an unspoken signal that draws people in. Because when a man trusts himself, other people trust him automatically. Women feel safer around him. Men feel more respectful toward him. Opportunities flow his way because he radiates certainty. Self-trust is the core of magnetism. It's the foundation of your presence. It's the difference between a man who gets overlooked and a man who gets remembered. And here's the most powerful part. Self-trust is built through decisions. Every time you keep your word to yourself, whether it's a small discipline, a boundary, or a truth you stand on, you increase your psychological gravity. And that gravity is what people feel when you enter a room, long before you speak. There's something deep within every man that determines whether he becomes magnetic or forgettable. It's not charm, it's not boldness, it's not even confidence in the way most people define it. What truly separates magnetic men from average men is their relationship with tension. Most men run from tension. Magnetic men hold it. Think about the moments that make you uncomfortable. Silence during a conversation, a woman looking you directly in the eyes, someone challenging your opinion, the feeling of not knowing what's going to happen next. These moments create tension, and your reaction to that tension tells the world everything about you. When you rush to fill silence, you communicate nervousness. When you laugh too quickly, you communicate insecurity. When you over-explain, you communicate self-doubt. When you fold under pressure, you communicate fragility. But a magnetic man, he does the opposite. He breathes through tension instead of escaping it. He sits in silence as if it belongs to him. He looks back without flinching. He speaks the truth without softening it for approval. And this ability, this calm mastery of tension, creates an unspoken psychological effect. People feel drawn to your presence without knowing why. Because holding tension signals inner strength. It signals emotional maturity. It signals that you are not desperate for reassurance or validation. It signals that you can withstand pressure, uncertainty, and intensity. Women feel this deeply. A man who can handle tension feels safe, grounded, and powerful. A man who collapses under tension feels unpredictable, volatile, or emotionally fragile. Here's the reality most men never learn. Magnetism is the byproduct of inner emotional control. Not fake control, not forced calmness. Real control that comes from knowing who you are and trusting yourself enough to not react impulsively. That's why the men who speak slowly, move deliberately, and don't rush to prove anything seem so compelling. Their energy says, I don't fear this moment. And when a man doesn't fear the moment responds to him. This ability doesn't require good looks, height, money, or status. It requires one thing, your willingness to stop running from discomfort. When you can stay still in the moments that make other men fold, you become unforgettable. Because tension doesn't break magnetic men, it reveals them. Men feel more respectful toward him. Opportunities flow his way because he radiates certainty. Self-trust is the core of magnetism. It's the foundation of your presence. It's the difference between a man who gets overlooked and a man who gets remembered. And here's the most powerful part. Self-trust is built through decisions. Every time you keep your word to yourself, whether it's a small discipline, a boundary, or a truth you stand on, you increase your psychological gravity, and that gravity is what people feel when you enter a room, long before you speak. There's a truth about magnetism that almost no one talks about, and it's the part most men overlook. Mystery is magnetic. Not tricks, not manipulation, not showing off, but the subtle energy of being fully yourself without giving everything away. Think about the men who leave a room and people can't stop talking about them. They didn't overshare, they didn't perform, they didn't explain themselves. They left a part of themselves unspoken, a part that only those willing to pay attention can feel. That unspoken part is magnetic because it creates curiosity, tension, and desire, all at a subconscious level. Most men destroy their own magnetism by overexposure. They feel insecure, so they explain, justify, and overshare. They think the world will like them better if it knows everything, but psychology says the opposite. People are drawn to what they can't fully predict, can't fully understand, and can't fully control. A magnetic man understands this instinctively. He doesn't need to perform to impress. He doesn't need to be liked by everyone. He doesn't need to tell people how to feel about him. He simply shows up fully, grounded, aligned with his truth, and lets the energy do the rest. There's also a subtle sexual psychology here. Women and even men respond to energy more than words. When you radiate calm, confidence, and self-possession, you communicate value without saying it. You don't chase attention. You naturally command it. And that is the real secret most men never learn. Magnetism is energy first, image second. And here's the part that will shift your mindset. You can build this magnetic energy today, not by trying harder, not by reading endless pickup tactics, and not by faking confidence. You build it by cultivating inner depth, emotional clarity, and a life aligned with your values. Every small decision to honor your time, your emotions, and your boundaries compounds into magnetic energy. Because energy isn't created by showing off, it's created by showing up fully as yourself, consistently and unapologetically. When you combine emotional control, presence, self-trust, and a hint of mystery, the result is undeniable. People can't ignore you, women feel drawn to you, and your life begins to operate on a higher level than it ever did before. This is the magnetism that lasts. Not temporary attraction, not forced charm. Real, sustainable, psychological pull that comes from mastery over yourself. Here's the truth most men never grasp. Magnetism is a lifestyle, not a tactic. It isn't something you switch on for dates or social events. It's a reflection of your inner world, the energy you carry, the emotional stability you cultivate, and the clarity with which you operate create a gravitational pull that no amount of advice, charm, or status can replicate. Magnetism is built on 3 pillars: presence, self-trust, and depth. Presence means being fully in the moment without distraction or neediness. Self-trust means acting from your values and instincts instead of others' approval. Depth means having a life, thoughts, and emotions worth noticing, and the courage to carry them without oversharing. When these 3 combine, a man becomes magnetic without trying. People feel it before they even know why. But here's the catch most men ignore. The world tests you constantly. Women test energy and boundaries. Friends test consistency. Life tests resilience. Every moment of discomfort is an opportunity to reinforce your magnetism or to undermine it by reacting unconsciously. Magnetic men respond, not react. They hold their ground without aggression, maintain clarity without arrogance, and navigate uncertainty without fear. Psychology also shows that magnetic men create a subtle hierarchy in their energy, not by dominating others, but by being unshakable themselves. When a man isn't emotionally dependent on approval, others feel drawn, intrigued, and inspired. They sense safety, stability, and competence, even if it's invisible on the surface. And here's the most important part. This type of magnetism isn't reserved for a select few. It can be developed. Every choice you make to strengthen emotional control, honor your boundaries, cultivate curiosity, and embrace your unique presence compounds over time. It becomes automatic. It becomes instinctive. It becomes part of your aura. So ask yourself the hard question. How often are you allowing external chaos to dictate your energy? How often are you sacrificing your presence for attention, your depth for approval, or your calm for drama? The answers reveal the gap between who you are now and the magnetic man you could become. And here's what I want you to do next. Identify the single habit that weakens your energy the most, and take one conscious step today to reclaim it. Comment your answer below. What's the one thing that, if mastered, would make you magnetic immediately? If this opened your eyes, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share it with a friend who needs to hear this truth today.